It is truly an honor and a pleasure to be here with you this morning, and I want to first, again, thank and congratulate Dean Gallion on his leadership on this issue, and just say, we work in schools all across the country at GLSEN, and we know that it has to come right from the top if things are really going to move forward, and that's clearly the tone you've set, and that's very, very important. And I also want to underscore my admiration and thanks to Tim Larrabee for his leadership and courage here, and also the role that he plays within other professional associations, really bringing light and attention to critical issues. So Tim, it's a great pleasure to be here as part of this pioneering conference. I also have to give, I did it in the Twitterverse, and I'm going to do it in real time as well, just say welcome and thank you so much to our local GLSEN chapter leadership who's here with us today, and the amazing members of the local Jumpstart student leadership team who are doing great work, and it's a pleasure to have them here. And also thanks to our friends, just to say, I'm glad the local PFLAG chapter is here as well. PFLAG has been an ally to GLSEN for many, many years. So I hope that everyone here is making use of those resources and that you'll go introduce yourselves. There are very important local advocates here as resources for you as you move this work forward. Now, I am particularly excited to be at a conference where you are beginning some very important work. I flew in from New York City. GLSEN's headquarters are in New York. We have a public policy office in DC. We do a lot of work at the federal level. But we have also 35 local chapters across the country. We have our great chapter here. We're in Maine. We're in Washington State. We're in Houston. We're in Middle Tennessee. We're in Nebraska. We are in places where you might not expect to see this work moving forward. And for me, the real fuel for the job that I do every day is knowing that there are folks like our chapter leaders and individuals like you who are moving the work forward in unexpected ways, in unexpected places, and pioneering in ways that my job is designed to support. A lot of what we do at GLSEN is about providing you with the data and the proven programming and the resources and the curricular materials to move this forward. And a lot of times we found that the statistics are the way to make the case. But I want to tell you this morning, you're going to hear a lot about statistics. You've seen some of them up on the screen so far. But I'm going to take a step back now. You'll have the rest of the day to talk about the stats. But I want to talk a bit about what exactly this project is really about. What does it mean to take on issues of sexual orientation and gender identity in education? What does it mean to start that conversation? I'm also particularly excited to be here today because one of my dreams is coming true. I and GLSEN are going to the Super Bowl. Not literally, but I'll frame that for you now, and I'll come back to it at the end, because our presence at the Super Bowl on Sunday is really about exactly the work that you're doing here. It's about interrupting one conversation and starting another. So let me tell you exactly what I mean. In order just to set the tone a bit about what these issues are really about, I want to go back a number of years that I will not name to the year that I entered high school. I went off to high school. I actually, the way I put it sometimes, with just love and respect for my parents, I ran away to boarding school because I had the opportunity to do so. I didn't want to be around my parents at a time when I knew I wasn't interested in dating. So I went off to a boarding school, and I really threw myself into schoolwork and was so excited to be at in a challenging academic environment. And I enjoyed school a lot. I was a new kid in a school where the day students had been there for many years, knew each other. And it turned out that I actually liked academic work a little too much. So there came a day in my first year in high school when I broke the curve in my English class and on a quiz. And the next time I came into the classroom for that class, next day I walked into the classroom and it was curiously empty. And I saw this little paper doll hanging by its neck from the window shade. And I walked over, and on the paper doll was written, "Eliza is a dyke." Now, I wasn't out. This was a number of years ago. And I wasn't out to anybody but myself at that point. I don't think that use of that word had anything to do with my sexual orientation. It had to do with the fact that I had stepped out of line. And that word was a weapon available to one of my classmates who wanted to put me back in my place. Believe me, it worked. I didn't raise my hand in that class for a long time after that. So that was one of the ways that those issues came into play among students. But there was also a way that the messages about what it meant. I arrived at high school knowing that I knew I was a lesbian, but I didn't know how was that going to work? At the time, states could still outlaw gay and lesbian life. It's only been about, what is it now, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years. 8 years since that's no longer the case. We're far behind the rest of the world in that respect. But in the curriculum, this showed up as well. I had an ethics class one day. The topic of our discussion was whether gay and lesbian people should be allowed to adopt children, an issue that is still alive in our political life today. But imagine what it meant to a high school sophomore to sit in a classroom where her right to be a parent was being debated. Just remember that we still face this today, whether it's in the classroom that it gets discussed. It's very much a conversation that's showing up on the front page of newspapers everywhere. So I had my personal experience of issues of sexual orientation, of gender identity in high school, and then flash forward a few years to now when I have 2 daughters, a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, and which, as any parent will tell you, I'm sure there are a few parents in the room, changes your perspective on life immeasurably. But let me tell you what happened when my older daughter entered kindergarten, just to show how much these issues are still with us, besides the statistics that we can turn to at any time. So when my daughter Clara started kindergarten last year, after 3 weeks, one day she came home, and she got really mad at me for something or other, as kids do, and she looked at me and she gathered up all her strength and she said, "Mama, you are a sissy." 3 weeks in kindergarten, and she'd learned that was the thing she was going to reach for when she was really mad at me. She didn't really know what it meant, clearly, but that was what she had learned in 3 weeks about how you really could hurt somebody. That's what she'd learned somehow from her peers. What did she learn from the actual curriculum? Well, on the first day of kindergarten at her new school, her first homework assignment was to bring a photograph of her family into class. My daughter Clara has 2 moms who are a family formed through adoption. We don't look like each other. Our skin colors are different from each other in my family. And so I sent my little girl off to her first day in a new school wondering, oh my goodness, what is going to happen when they go around at circle time and everyone holds up a picture of their family? How is my little girl going to be received? And now, of course, my partner and I had spent a lot of time figuring out the best possible choice. We found a really great magnet public school in Brooklyn. It really worked on this a lot. But when you think about it, the problem of how these values and biases and prejudices get transmitted is so subtle. The impacts are not subtle at all. But the way these things happen, again, any parent will tell you, little pitchers have big ears, right? It's like they pick up on everything. So imagine going around the circle. When that teacher got to my daughter's picture, did she say too little? Did she say too much? Was she surprised? Did her eyes widen? Did she skip over? Did she express discomfort in some way about how other kids were going to respond, or what other parents might think that night when their children went home and reported what had happened in class that day? You know, we have learned as a nation in the last couple of years far too much through tragedy about some of the individual casualties and harm that come about through bullying, through harassment, through the direct expressions of violence and prejudice that take place in our schools. And we know, research has demonstrated that prejudices expressed as through bullying and bullying itself have serious long-term consequences for every child in the bullying dynamic who experiences them. But today I'm going to focus a little bit more on another aspect of bullying, and truly on the hidden curriculum, on the unarticulated and unacknowledged things that students are taught in school every single day. Because taken together, it is important to remember that bias-based bullying, that kind of bullying that gives voice to words like sissy and faggot and dyke, and the way collectively a school community responds, are the ways that the hidden curriculum is given teeth and power. It gives power to our collective prejudices in the lived experience of children every single day. Now, how does this work? One thing I want to be clear about in talking about this issue is that bullying is a dynamic that affects every participant, okay? A bully is a child who needs help because a bully is expressing the need to have power over somebody else, and they'll reach for any weapon they have at hand to do that. The target is a child that needs help because they're being deliberately isolated from their peers by a deliberate pattern of behavior on the part of another student or students to try to separate them out from the group and demonstrate that they're less than. And the bystanders also need help because they learn lessons from witnessing the dynamic and how the community responds that will be with them for a lifetime. There was a very important study about bullying that came out of the Netherlands recently that really caught my attention because it gave voice to something that I have been trying to articulate for some time. Bullies, this study found, are not necessarily motivated by individual hatred, either of a person or a group. When you're talking about childhood bullying, this is not a hate crime in itself, in this act. But bullies, what they do is they're really good at figuring out what members of their community are not going to be defended. This is how prejudice enters the picture. Because when bullies use words, or when bullies use words that describe a disfavored group, or when bullies target someone who's believed to be a member of a disfavored group, they figured out how to isolate that person, and they are perpetuating a prejudice. So let's talk about how this, just a few stats to show how this plays out. Just a couple of weeks ago, GLSEN released a new study on bullying and harassment and issues of sexual orientation and gender nonconformity and gender identity in elementary schools. What we found in that context, in elementary schools, half of the elementary school students we surveyed, this was a survey nationally, had more than 1,000 respondents who were students and then who were teachers separately to talk about what was going on in their schools. It's called Playgrounds and Prejudice. It's available for download on our site, and I think my friends may have a copy of it over at their table. But about half of elementary school students hear the phrase, "that's so gay," meant to mean something negative on a regular basis. More than a quarter of them hear the word fag on a regular basis in elementary school. This is long before there are individual gay or lesbian or transgender students evident to the community in a direct way. This gets worse and worse as you go through school. By middle school is really a peak for violence against LGBT people. I'll use LGBT, although I'm going to figure out how to use SOGI after Tim's very wise words. In middle school, nearly 40% of out LGBT students report having been physically assaulted at school. We're not talking about name-calling at that point. Physical assault. In high school, 90% of LGBT students in the high school grades have experienced physical, verbal, sexual harassment at school, and 1 in 5 has been physically assaulted. Now, one of the disturbing corollaries to this is the fact that clearly adults are not responding when this happens in the ways they need to send a clear message. Instead, the reluctance sometimes of adults to respond is reinforcing that hidden curriculum. If you are a faggot, you will not be defended. Here's what we see happening. And please recognize, I come to this as the daughter of a high school teacher, a straight woman who was one of GLSEN's first volunteers. I have tremendous respect and admiration for people who work in our schools. I work with hundreds of thousands of them every year, but something isn't working right. What we see in high school is that 80% of LGBT students say that when a member of the faculty or staff is present and a homophobic comment is made, they do little or nothing about it. Those students report when something happens to them, they say, I'm not going to report it because I don't think anything will happen. And when people do report, the majority of students who actually take that step of reporting, when we ask them, well, what happened? They say absolutely nothing. So the systems are not working as they need to disrupt this cycle. And when the system does not respond, when an individual doesn't respond, when a community doesn't respond to this problem, you are not just perpetuating an individual harm for that one child who is being bullied. You are actually teaching an unbelievably powerful lesson and allowing prejudice to be transmitted from one generation to the next, whether that is due to not being aware of the problem. I think some people for whom this is not. My cousin the other day, literally within the last 6 months, said to me, oh, that something or other is so gay. My cousin, right? To me. I'm a big believer in the thoughtlessness behind some of this. It is not about hatred, right? So on the other hand, there are people who aren't aware of the problem. There are people who may not care about the problem. And there may be people who are too afraid to act because they're concerned about controversy if you take up homosexuality in schools, or people who don't know what to do when confronted with the problem. So how do we break that cycle? At GLSEN, our job is to develop information and knowledge about the evidence of the harms that this behavior costs, that costs us all, and identify the solutions that really make a difference. We develop and test programs to try to help educators be prepared to intervene. We raise awareness about the problem itself. We support and train and work with local advocates, students, parents, and teachers who will carry that message and carry those programs forward. And we advocate for policies that will require action, provide some form of at least abstract leadership to start with in a policy that requires action at all levels of government. We want to make sure that all of the resources and opportunities provided by a K-12 education are truly available to every child who walks through the schoolhouse door every single morning. Because every day in this country, 55 million children go to school, and they all deserve a fair shot at a good education. The good news is that one thing I've learned in my work is that if you carry this message to people where they are, literally, and where they're at, in terms of their attitudes and awareness, that there is such a font of goodwill out there in terms of the well-being of young people, okay? And my work has taken me to some unlikely places, so I understand that it feels really challenging to be in a context where your work may not be understood or well received, but let me tell you, you're not alone, and people are finding a way to really forge a path forward no matter where they are. If you make your case well and with integrity and with conviction, you will see change. A couple of examples from my recent travels. I had the tremendous privilege of traveling to a school safety conference in Decatur, Alabama, with a woman named Sardina Walker, a member of GLSEN's National Board of Directors, an African-American woman from Springfield, Massachusetts, who lost her son Carl to suicide at the age of 11. The two of us went off to Decatur for this conference, and we walked into the conference venue, and there we were a 40-something lesbian from New York, and an African-American mother from Springfield, Massachusetts, in a Baptist megachurch in Decatur, Alabama, with a mostly white congregation. And the attendees, it was a 1,200-seat church. It was full of school safety officials from around the state of Alabama. And the first speaker, who were almost entirely white, I think Sir Diener was probably the only African-American person in the room. Sir Diener and her sister. Her sister had come along as well because it was the anniversary of Carl's death was near. So we get in, and the first person to get up said, I'm so glad to be back in Alabama. He was a representative of the Federal Office of Safe and Drug-Free Schools, and he got up and said, I'm so glad to be home in Alabama again, where you can have a civic conference like this in a church like this, and nobody freaks out about it. And we're going in the back going, we're freaking out. I'm freaking out, and Sir Diener was certainly freaking out. Sir Diener got up, gave her talk, whispering to me, have the car running when I'm done. But I have to say that after she spoke, there was a long line of people there waiting to speak with her. She didn't stint, she didn't hold back. She said she carried her message. And afterwards, one of the gentlemen who came up to talk with her was the head of Association of Retired Justices for the state of Alabama. And about a week later, we launched a policy advocacy action to get people to call Congress about the Safe Schools Improvement Act, Sir Diener's priority and one of GLSEN's top priorities for legislation. And the largest numbers of calls we generated were from the state of Alabama, because the Association of Retired Justices had banded together to make those calls, having heard Sir Diener make her case and tell her story. At the beginning of the month of December, I was in Rio de Janeiro at a conference sponsored by UNESCO, the United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization. Now, being in Rio to talk about LGBT issues in itself is not surprising. The country of Brazil practically leads the world in terms of AIDS and HIV transmission prevention programming. But while I was there as the only representative of a U.S. NGO, one of the only U.S. NGOs there, there was also a student in attendance, which was remarkable as well. But I met health and education officials from Cameroon, China, Namibia, Lithuania, Peru, Samoa, Macedonia, and other countries. And they came to me to ask for help in starting professional outreach in their countries to start the conversation on these issues. I'll be going to a follow-up meeting in May, and there looks to be, we are working on organizing a professional delegation to go to Namibia to talk to school counselors on this issue. And then just last week, I was in Houston, Texas. We have a wonderful new chapter there in Houston, and I went down, we held our national board meeting there last week, and as part of the visit, I was going on Great Day Houston last Friday with two student leaders we work with on a local Jumpstart team. And we get there, and all the producers of Great Day Houston were a little nervous. They started talking about, well, we're going to come at the issue this way, and we're going to do this and that. And there's this class of high school students from Katy, Texas in the audience. And we don't know how they're going to respond. So just be ready. Well, so we go out and we start talking, and I am so pleased to report that if you talk about these issues as they appear in schools, students know exactly what you're talking about because they live with this every single day. So the students of Katy, Texas were right there with us in the conversation, cheering and talking. But what really got to me was that about 3/4 of the way through the segment, these things go by like that, I look up, and in the back row, there was this one boy who was beaming, grinning from ear to ear. And I have to believe that that young man saw for the first time that there are people out there fighting for him, and that all of his classmates knew what we were talking about. Now, I hope that the work of that day continued with support once they got back to school. And that, again, is why GLSEN is here, to try to make that happen. But when it comes down to it, disrupting the hidden curriculum is about breaking into that unarticulated, unspoken conversation that's happening every day and having the courage to break through and break the silence. breaking through that chatter to get to the real conversation that has to happen to make things change. And doing that can be really scary. You know, in my work, the fact is I live in New York City. I'm the head of this organization. I can go home, right? I leave Houston. I go home from Namibia or Rio or wherever I may be. But I feel like because of that, I have a certain degree of strength, and I hope I can come and helpfully start those conversations in some places. I've been on the O'Reilly Factor. I've debated focus on the family. And I've threatened to sue the Family Research Council over things they've said about me and about GLSEN because I have some grounding to do those kinds of things. The Family Research Council had to back down, so that was nice. It's like, oh, it works. I use my power and privilege of location, of race, of education, being middle class, which doesn't mean anything to anyone because we don't have a middle class anymore. But to disrupt those comfortable conversations, to say, hey, this is not okay. There's more going on here than we're willing to say directly, and we have to talk about it, and we have to do something about it. And I have to say, this Sunday, we're going to be disrupting that conversation in a way that actually still makes me nervous despite those other experiences, but very, very excited. On Sunday, we will be taking our message to the Super Bowl. We were given the incredible opportunity to have a lot of airtime on the huge Jumbotron that will greet all 70,000 people going into the stadium and be with the folks who will be tailgating outside all day long with our Ad Council campaign. We'll also have a camera crew on site to record their responses. So I just want to show you, with thanks to Kat, I'm just going to show you two of these, I think, because I think we're coming up on time. Oh, no, maybe not so bad. Let me show you, let's start with Wanda Sykes, and I just want to show you the way that we'll be disrupting the conversation.
Dude, check out this chef, right? Right? That's so gay. That's really gay. Dude, look at those pants.
Please don't say that.
What?
Don't say that something is gay when you mean that something is dumb or stupid. It's insulting. It's like if I thought this pepper shaker was stupid and I said, man, this pepper shaker is so 16-year-old boy with a cheesy mustache. Just saying. When you say that's so gay, do you realize what you say? Knock it off.
So we've got the 4 PSAs. They've been running for a couple years now. I'm going to show you the one on top, the NBA, our most recent one.
Welcome to my block party. Glad you can make it.
The only triple doubles you get come with fries.
Last time you blocked someone, you were online.
I can do this all day. Your moves are just gay.
Using gay to mean dumb or stupid, not cool.
Not cool.
Not in my house, not anywhere. It's not creative, it's offensive to gay people. And you're better than that.
All right, you can shut that down. Thank you. Yeah, we launched the first PSAs in that series back in the fall of 2008. And I'm very pleased to report, we do, research is at the heart of everything we do. We do a lot of program evaluation, and what we have seen since the launch of the campaign is you can actually track, our target demographic is 13 to 16 years old, and within that demographic we have seen an increase, 10% increase in the first year, now we're up to like 15% increase in the number of respondents who say you should never use the phrase, "that's so gay," and in the number of respondents who say that they and their friends do not use the words faggot and dyke. There are other components of this campaign. There are online banners that are much more direct about other kinds of anti-LGBT language. You can't use those words on television. In fact, they told us that this would never make it onto TV either. So we got a great base on cable, and then the broadcast network started getting braver about it. And the partnership of the NBA, which we launched last spring, has really taken this all to the next level. So yes, that will be running on Sunday. We will see what conversations ensue. And I have to say that it has been, so I've been now at GLSEN for 10 years, And we have had significant setbacks. We've responded to tragedy. We've dealt with hostile receptions in some places. But we've gone out, GLSEN, our staff, our programs, our research, our advocacy, our amazing chapters, and our student leaders have gone out to start those conversations. And it is so thrilling 10 years in to see the great signs of progress. I can point to it in things like the Ad Council tracking study, but I want to leave you with one example of how it played out in my own life. So about 6 weeks to 2 months after my daughter called me a sissy, I was with her one day. I was on my cell phone, as parents will be. We're going up to do the grocery shopping or something, and I'm telling my friend, yeah. And then Clara called me a sissy. And Clara looked up at me and she said, Mama, don't use that word. That hurts people's feelings. So between 3 weeks in and 8 weeks in, something had gone right. Someone at her school was having the conversation that made that point. So I am here, I hope, to help you launch the work of your day and to thank you and congratulate you for going out to start those conversations, to break a cycle that has costs beyond what any individual, what any parent, what any teacher wants to contemplate. But that ultimately, if we break that cycle, we're paving the way for better lives for our students and a better future for us all. Thank you so much for being part of that work, for being here today, and to the organizers for putting this all together. So I thank you and really congratulate you on starting these conversations. Thank you very, very much.